This is lecture 213, and in this lecture, we're going to go through this whole process again, just like we did in exercise and lecture 211 and exercise and lecture 212. This time we're going to follow all the way through to the end where we actually make the components that we would take to the laser cutter to cut out and build our 3D model. So we're going to start again from the very beginning. I know this is a bit repetitive, but I think sometimes it's useful to go back to the very beginning and run this whole process through. So I'm connected to the remote desktop here at DVC, and I'm going to go ahead and before I even get started, connect in to my OneDrive account. So this is a little bit of a reminder in case you were to lose your connection. I think they fixed the internet connectivity issues, but you never know, so it's always worth double checking here. I'm going to go ahead and click that up arrow and look at the OneDrive. It says I'm not signed in right now, which is correct. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And so right here, you would enter your Student Insight email address. For me, I don't have an Insight email address. Instead, I have my faculty, so I have to put my faculty one in here. There we go, and I'll go ahead and click on Sign In. I'm going to choose Work or School. You will do the same. And the next thing it'll ask for is the password, so I'm going to need to put my password in here. I have mine stored in my password manager, so you have to bear with me for just a second. And there we go. I'm going to copy that, paste that right in here. And it'll go ahead and sign me into OneDrive. The default location of that folder is just fine. And right here, we're going to uncheck the desktop and documents folders, and as well as the pictures folders, because we don't want to sync any of those from this computer. And now we're going to click through all the default setups. And as soon as I do that, it's going to open my OneDrive folder. And once it opens my OneDrive folder, once it kind of populates the list here, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and select everything. So I'll press Control-A to select everything. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say Free Up Space. And what that means is that it's going to keep all of these files remote on the server. It's not going to download them all onto my local OneDrive. It's going to keep them all remote. And this takes a little bit of time because it's got to chug through all the files that are in OneDrive. But this saves a bunch of time, so it's not going to spend an hour syncing. And we're going to download just those pieces that I really need. So we'll let this finish its processing here in just a little bit. This is taking a while because I have a lot of files in my OneDrive account. And we'll let that finish up. There we go. And then I'll go to today's demonstration. So this for you guys would be your exercise for today. And I'll come down here, it's 213, and I'm going to right click on that exercise and I'm going to say always keep on this device. And that's going to download all of the files for that exercise only into my OneDrive account. I'll make sure to save my work as I work today in that folder, and then that'll stay synced just in case I were to lose my connection. So the next piece here is that I'm going to go ahead and log in to SketchUp. So I'll double click and I'll open up SketchUp. And we'll give that just a second. It's going to verify the license. I'll choose the architectural template. That's in inches, which is good. And it's going to go ahead and load up SketchUp for me. Perfect. We don't need to download the update, so we'll go ahead and remind me later, or just hit the little X button. And remember, our purpose here is that we just want to bring in the terrain. And now, you may already have the terrain, in which case you can skip this step for right now, but I want to go through the whole process so we have the whole process worked through. So I'll go ahead, and this is, again, SketchUp Pro 2020. I'm going to go to File, and then Geolocation and Add Location. And it's going to ask me to sign in. This is new for the 2020 version of SketchUp. So we'll click on Sign In. I'm going to sign in with Google, so I'll use my Digital Tools for Architects email. I'll click Next. I have to paste my password in here. I'll click Next. And it's probably going to error on me, which it appears to be doing each time we do this. So we'll go ahead and close that, and we'll come back here. and try that geolocation one more time. Add location, sign in, and we'll do that sign in one more time. And there we go. I'm all signed in and I'm ready to use SketchUp, and the add location dialog box pops up. I'll go ahead and click next through these initiation prompts here. We'll continue to add location, and there we go. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to zoom in, and I think last time I picked Mount Diablo, so we'll zoom in on Mount Diablo again. And I'm looking for a zoom level of 17 here. That seems to be about right for being able to actually get the data. I'll click on Select Region. I'll choose Digital Globe as my provider. That region looks okay, and we'll go ahead and click on Import. Now this process shouldn't take too long. If it's taking too long, you probably need to quit SketchUp and try again. I can confirm that the terrain actually showed up here by going to File, and then Geolocation, and Show Terrain. And there we go, it turned out, and I can see my terrain nicely here. I'll go ahead and do a File, and then Save As. Now Rhino is not going to be compatible with SketchUp 2020, so I'm going to need to change my Save As type back a few versions. We'll use SketchUp 2018, and we'll call this Mount Diablo. Now this is probably version 4 of Mount Diablo because I've already done it a few times. Let me go to my OneDrive folder. We'll go to my exercise folder for today. And we'll make sure that Mount Diablo is here. Look at that, I have Mount Diablo 4 already. How about Mount Diablo 5 for this one? And we'll go ahead and click on Save again. Perfect. So now SketchUp is done. We'll go ahead and close that file. Now the good news is OneDrive is always syncing my files in the background, so I'm not going to lose that file. It's currently doing its syncing process, and yep, look at that. It uploaded 213 already, the Mount Diablo SketchUp, Mount Diablo 5, so that's great. Let me go ahead and open up Rhino. And we'll give this a little bit of time to load up here. I'll make sure I'm choosing the large object inches template. We'll go ahead and say OK. A couple things I'm going to do when I first open up Rhino. First thing I'll do is go to the Render menu and then choose my current renderer and make sure it's set to V-Ray for Rhino. And then I'm also going to go to the Tools menu and I'll go to Options, and this is something specific to the lab machines. Under View here, I'm going to click on OpenGL and I'm going to uncheck that GPU tessellation option, and I'll say OK. So now this file's ready. I can go ahead and bring in that SketchUp file. Now I know I'm going a little bit faster than I did in previous lectures, but this is because this is repetitive and I've done this several times already. So I'll go ahead and go to File and then Import. Notice it's not Insert, it's Import. And I'll go into my folder for today. And it was Mount Diablo 5, there it is. We'll go ahead and say Open. We're going to bring it in as a mesh. We'll go ahead and say OK. And that then brings in my SketchUp terrain into Rhino. There it is. So I'm going to get a little bit organized here. I'm going to go into my layer stack. I'm going to take layer 5 here and call it SketchUp. And I'll change my mesh to be on the SketchUp layer. There it is. I can confirm that because I can turn it on and turn it off. I'll make a sub-layer underneath the SketchUp layer. We'll call this SketchUp Plane. And we'll right-click and say Change Object Layer as well right there. I can now delete the original SketchUp layers. So we'll take all of those and delete them. They're gone. And I'm left with my basic layers up here. So on layer 1, I'm going to rename this to be Contour X. And layer 2 I'll rename to be contour Y. And I'm going to essentially convert this mesh into a NURBS surface, and then I'll do a rebuild of it to smooth it out just a little bit. So my contour X and contour Y, I'll make contour X the active layer at the moment. And I'll go ahead and start with my contour command. It's available by typing contour or going to curve, curve from objects, contour. I need to turn on my vertex snap to be able to snap to one of these corners. Doesn't matter which corner here. And once I snap to it, I want to make sure that I'm going off with ortho turned on. I'm just going off in space and not snapping to any other object. That's the key here. So I'm going right along the x-axis there. And then my distance between the contours is going to be 100 feet. And it will then slice up my mesh. All right, so I'm going to repeat this process in the contour Y. I'm going to make sure that nothing is selected, and then I'm only going to contour the mesh. Because remember, if you contour the lines, you're going to end up getting points. We don't want those. So it's the mesh only. I'll go back to curve, curve from objects, and then contour. I'll pick the same corner here. The difference is that I'm going to go off in the Y direction. Again, not snapping to any object. And my distance between the contours is once again going to be 100 feet. And I now have the contours in both the X and the Y direction. I can turn off the SketchUp mesh and look just at my contour. And if I look at that in the top view, they should all look like a perfect grid. I shouldn't have any lines that are jagged. They should be straight lines. And at this point, I need to trim this big surface. So I'll select some curves that are inside like that. And then I'll go ahead and type trim. And I'm going to get rid of all the ragged edges. So I'll work my way around my file. When I'm done, I'll press enter. And that leaves me with a nice contained network of curves. So I'm contained all the way around. That's perfect. I'm going to take layer 3 here, make that active, and I'm going to rename this to be terrain. It's now time to do the curve network of these curves. But before I do that, I want to save it. So I'll go to File and then Save. And let's save this for today. And I'll click Save. There it is. Now it's time to do that curve network. So I'm going to go to Surface, Curve Network. Or I could type in Network SRF into the command line. I'm going to select the curves, and I'll press enter. Yes, I'll go ahead and do that. If we get A, B, C, and D, that's a good sign. We still have to wait for the little dialog box to pop up here. Perfect. I'll go ahead and say OK. And this will take a little bit of time. I'll pause the recording and then come back when it's done. OK, so it finished. That's good. Now remember, it's going to run really slow. So what I'm going to do is make a single click on that big blue square and wait. Patience is a virtue here. And when it highlights in complete yellow, I will type rebuild, followed by enter. And that will bring up the rebuild dialog box. Once the rebuild dialog box has shown up here, we're going to change our point count on U and V to be 200. Actually, I'm going to change it to 150 for each. So it'll smooth it a little bit more. So I have 150 and 150, and I'll go ahead and say OK. Once that rebuild has taken place, Rhino gets a lot faster and I can actually start to work and manipulate these surfaces. So I have my terrain. I'm going to turn off the contour X and contour Y layers. I'm left with just this terrain. I'll go ahead and switch over into the shaded mode. And I'm going to change the color over into black so that you guys can see it a little bit better on the screen here. So at this point, we now made it essentially to where we made it at the end of exercise 211. So not too bad. If I look at my time so far, what took 40 minutes on the first day now takes 17 minutes. So that's good. We've sped up a little bit. So we're back again working on this terrain, and now we're going to continue where we started last class in exercise 212, and that is setting this up for a physical model. And so the first thing we need to know in order to create this piece of terrain in a physical model is what scale do we want to do this modeling at. And so depending on what this particular model is supposed to represent, you're going to be probably in a studio class given a particular scale. Oh, it should be, 16th scale or, 64th scale or whatever that scale is. I have that cheat sheet that's at the bottom of your handout for today. It's also on the course website right here, and I pulled it up. And so this is something that'll help you determine how large to make your particular object. So we're going to create a model that is 11 inches by 17 inches in its final paper size or model size. So with that information, we need to pay attention to what scale we want to do our modeling in. And so I think last class I did it at 1 to 250 in scale. You could pick any one of these scales and create your model that way. For the interest of changing things, I'm going to do it completely different. I'll do it at let's do it at 1/64th scale. And that means that my final model is going to be 704 feet by 1,088 feet. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to draw a rectangle. So this is just a regular rectangle corner to corner. And that's going to be the size. So I'll say at, it would help if I could remember it. Let's see here. 704 by 1088. So we'll say at 704 feet, comma 1088 feet, and that gives me the final size of that rectangle. Now obviously this scale is much different than the last scale that I built, and that means that this rectangle is a lot smaller. Still fine, and it will still end up turning out to be the 11 inches by 17 inches. So at this point I need to kind of decide what piece of the terrain do I want to keep. So maybe I want to move this over so I'm getting a little bit of that hill or that mountain right in there. Sure. I could also pull this over a little bit further and get that kind of unique little valley in there. That could be interesting. So with that, I'll switch over into the top view, and I'm going to use the project command to make this rectangle go along the surface. So I'm in the top view. I'll go ahead and initiate project. So I'll type in project or go to curve, curve from objects, project. And I'm going to select the surface to project onto. There's the surface. I'll press enter. And it will then create a curve that is on the surface that represents the model that I'm working on. So there it is. I can now go ahead and I can trim the excess terrain off of this because this is the only piece of the model that I'm building. So I'll go ahead and type trim, and I will trim off that excess piece of terrain, and I'm left with just this little piece of terrain here, which is ultimately going to be my model. I now need to cut this up basically in intervals, but those intervals, those contour lines, are going to be the thickness of the cardboard that I'm ultimately going to be using to construct this physical model. So once again, I'll come back to my little creation chart here, my cheat sheet, and I'll say, okay, at 1/64th scale, if I come over here, at 5/32 of an inch, my contour interval is going to be 10 feet. So it's a little bit cleaner doing it at 64th scale because I'm in 5/32 of an inch. We're in a different system rather than the 1 to 200 at 31.250 or 39.063. etc. This one's pretty clean at 10.000 feet. So when I create my contour, it's going to be every 10 feet at this scale. So I'm going to go back to my terrain here. I'm going to create, or I'll just move down to layer 4. We'll call this topo lines, for lack of a better term. And then I'll go ahead and contour again. So I'll go to curve, curve from objects, contour, or I could type in contour. I'm going to select the base point right down here. I don't want to go in the X or the Y direction. I want to go straight up in the Z direction. So I'll shift my view so that I'm looking at the front view or the right side view and go straight up and down. Again, not snapping to anything. I want to be perfectly vertical. My distance between the contours now is going to be 10 feet, 10.000 feet. I can abbreviate to just 10 feet, and I'll press enter, and it will then slice up my piece of terrain for me. There it is. So I can go ahead and turn off the terrain and be left with just all of my little contour lines there. So at this point, this is really now about creating the steps along the sides. And as I said last class, I'm going to zoom selected here so that I can orbit around just this object. When we create the steps around the sides, we have two different methods of doing it, both of which are acceptable. It just depends on which one feels right for you. So the first method would be to create points on the ends of every one of these curves. And I'll do that using the multiple point tool. It's this tool here. And I will go ahead and I will create a point on the end by snapping to the end of every one of these lines. Okay. Once I have all of those points, oops, helps if you actually get the points on the line. There we go. Oops, there's another one I missed. Perfect. I'm going to select all of those. Boy, I'm bad at putting these on the ends. I'm going to select all of those points. I'm going to change my view slightly so I have a little bit easier time selecting them. There they all are. And then I will do a rotate 3D of those points. So I'll go to transform, rotate 3D, or I can type in rotate 3D. I'll pick the bottommost point. I'll go off in space along the axis, and I'll take those points from being straight up and down to being folded flat. Once they're folded flat, I can go ahead and I can draw the steps along the side. So I need to make sure my perpendicular snap is turned on, and I will hover over, oh, I have to turn on point snap too. There we go. I will hover over until I get perpendicular. And I will draw the steps going up the side. Like so. I'm not going to finish. When I'm done, I will select all of those points plus the curve that I just drew. I will do a rotate 3D again, and I'll fold those back up into their position. And if I did it correctly, I should see them as nice stairs, and I should be able to look in either the front view or the right side view and see a perfect set of stairs going up. So I shouldn't see any of those on an angle. If they're on an angle, we would need to fix them. Okay, so that's one method. The other method that we previously discussed was to change the C-plane so that the C-plane was in plane with the curves that you were working with. So right now the C-plane is set to world top, and I can go back and double check that by going to set C-plane and then world top. And if I want to set it to be along the side here, I can go to the little triangle, I can go to set C-plane, and it's going to be 3 points. I'll pick a point, one of these endpoints, as my origin. I'll go off along the axes here, and then I need to pick straight up and down. So I'll zoom out until I can pick straight up and down. There it is, straight up and down. And we can see that that grid has moved to be in plane like that. You may want the grid to be a little bit larger so you can see it better. If I right-click on Grid Snap and go to Settings, I can make the grid larger, so I'll increase the grid line count, and I'll do the minor grid lines every 12 inches. Okay? That spreads things out a little bit, and we can confirm that, yes, that plane is right along where it needs to be. So at this point, with the C-plane changed, I can go ahead and start drawing again. So I would start and then work my way down in steps using the same strategy. Like so. A couple things to point out. When we get to the bottom of a valley, right, we will be coming down like this. We reach the bottom of the valley and need to go straight across. This distance needs to be one of your contour intervals. So we need to go down at the bottom of a valley. In my case, it was 10 feet, so I'd go down 10 feet. And then we'd snap over and back up and continue. When I get to the top of a hill, here's an example of the top of a hill. In this scenario, I just go straight across and then continue my way back down. Like so. So I asked you last class to get to the point where you had all of the steps running all the way around your model. So that you guys don't have to watch me do all of these steps, I went ahead and I opened up my model from last class, which is right here, where I now have the steps going all the way around the sides, except for the corners. I deliberately didn't do the corners yet, and I asked you guys not to do the corners just yet. So I'm going to go ahead so that this is a little bit easier to see, and I'll take all of the sides. Oh, whoops, looks like I missed. I need to do this front one. And I'm going to put those on a layer called sides. And I'll change the color of that layer to be something like red so that you guys can see it in contrast here. Let me change object layer, and there we go. Now you can see the sides. Let's put that in the sides layer. Like that. So I didn't do this front piece here, so I'm going to go ahead and change my C-plane. So I'm going to go to Set C-plane. Remember, you always go back to World Top first. And then I'll go to Set C-plane 3 points. And let me snap to the end and to a point and to perpendicular. And we'll go off in space. Let me turn on ortho. There we go. Let me go straight up and down. There it is, going straight up and down. Perfect. So I'm in C-plane. I need to draw that last little bit. So we'll start right here. We'll get to there. This is the top of a hill, so we go straight across. We start going back down. We start going back down. I'm at the bottom of this hill. So in this scenario, I have to go down by my contour interval. So since I switched files here, my contour interval is different. This one was at 1 to 250. Therefore, it was 39.063 feet. So this time I have to type in 39.063 feet. There it is, going straight down. Okay, so I don't have anything left to snap to along this edge. So in this scenario, I'm just going to keep going and I'm going to leave it long. So I asked you last class not to worry about the corners just yet. Now comes the time where we're going to start paying attention to what's happening in the corners. Let me change this to be on the red layer here, like that. So I left this one long. If I look over here, this point comes around and ends up at that point. So I need to go down and then over to meet this. So I'll start right here again, and I can still draw down because my C-plane is still vertical there. So I could say I need to draw down by 39.063 feet. And then I need to come over, and the good news about perpendicular snap is I can use it to find that line and snap straight over. So there it is. I need to trim off this, so I'll take this as a trim, and I'll trim that piece right there.
So you just went over the lower one, right?
So I came over, and then this one went down to meet it. So let's look at this corner now. So this corner, we're coming down. This is going to step down and extend out. So I'll go ahead and start there. I'll go down by my 39.063 feet, and I'll leave it long. So now in this scenario, this contour, the next step down is this contour. So what I need to do is I need to extend this line from this point over to meet that. So I'll go ahead and snap here, and then snap to perpendicular there. And then I can use that as a trim for that piece as well. So the step is occurring around the corner. So I step up, I turn the corner and go back, and then I step up again. So you're always kind of double checking as you work. Okay, so that's at the bottom, it goes down. That one's at the top, it goes up. Now we're getting to this little corner here. So we're stepping up, stepping up, stepping up and up. Okay, this one's actually very easy. Essentially all we have to do is reset our C-plane. Let me go back to set C-plane. I'm going to do 3 reset world top. And then I can snap here, leave it long. I can snap here, leave it long. And then we can just trim. And I can get rid of that and that. So that's how that one meets. This is the bottom of a valley, so it goes over and then back up. And we work our way to this point here. At this point, we're going to leave it long. This one needs to go down and over. So I'll use my polyline. I'll snap to that point. My C-plane is no longer vertical, so I can't easily draw down unless I switch my views. So I'll switch my views and type 39.063 feet and make sure it's going straight down, and then I can use my perpendicular snap to snap those pieces together. So we'll go ahead and trim like that, and now we have that corner resolved. We work our way, there's the top, it's level, we work our way back down this side, all of that looks good, and we're back to where I started. So I've now worked through all of my corners, and that's going to vary depending on your particular terrain as to how those corners come together. In very rare instances, a contour will be exactly at one of the corners. That's okay, but it's not always going to happen. Okay, so now I need to start seeing this as a full set of sides. I have the steps, but I need to see it as a full set of sides. I'm going to do that by going ahead and drawing the sides. So I'll start at any one of the corners, and it doesn't matter which corner I start at. I'll start right here. And what I need to do is I need to draw straight down so that I'm lower than whatever my lowest point is in my terrain. So that's my lowest point here. I need to make sure that this is lower than that point. I could go ahead and type in, so if it's 39.063 times, say, 3, I could get in there, or I could just pick an arbitrary value that's definitely lower than wherever that point is. So I'm going to go ahead and extend down, maybe right about there. And then I'll move back into the perspective view. I'll leave this long. I'll start at this corner and go down and snap to perpendicular. I can then use this as a trim. I can trim that off. And you can now see that I have my first side. And I'm going to go through and select it all to right there. There's my first side. I can go ahead and join that together. It's edit join, or I can type in join, or I can press Control J. And that creates my first side of this little model. The next side of the model, I'm going to start again with my polyline tool. I'm going to start at the same corner here, draw down, snap to the bottom, and then go off in space this direction. I'll repeat the command. I'll snap at that corner, go down, and then I'll go ahead and trim like that. Then we'll go ahead and select it all like this, and I'll type join. Notice that at the corner I'm actually overlapping. So that corner has two lines. Same thing, we'll do it along the back. We'll start here, go down, leave it long. We'll start at this upper corner, go down, and snap to perpendicular. Then we'll go ahead and trim. And then we'll select them and join them together. It looks like this one was made of lots of pieces. And there it is. And then we'll go ahead and join that together. So Control J, type join, or go to Edit, Join. And then we'll do the last side right here. So we'll start, we'll come down, we'll go over, and we'll go back up. That one's pretty easy this time. We'll select it, plus all of my curves, and then we'll go ahead and type join again. So I now have all four sides established. And you should start to see how this resembles that physical model that we'd be constructing, ultimately, right? So let's take each of the sides and let's rotate those sides flat. So I'll use my rotate 3D command. I'll go to transform and then rotate 3D. And we'll use the bottom of each side as an axis and we'll fold them flat. I'll right click to repeat the command. And we'll fold that one flat. We'll take this piece, bottom is the axis, and we'll fold it flat. And here we are at the last one. Come on. And there we go, that one's folded flat as well. Okay, so that's folded flat. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking about actually laser cutting the model. I still have to get it down to size, I still have some scaling to do, but I'm going to go ahead and start to create some layers to work with. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this one laser cut. And then I'll create a sublayer on the laser cut layer for cut, and another sublayer on laser cut for engrave. So they're both sublayers of the laser cut layer. I'll take all of the sides and I'll put those on the cut layer. So I'll right click and say change object layer. They're now on the cut layer. And I'm going to need all of the topo lines to be projected flat so that I can cut those out as well. So you can see where this is crossover to what we've already done in class before. I'll create a temporary rectangular plane larger than all of my contours. I'll look at it in this top view. And what I need to do is I need to project all of those contours onto this plane. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my project command. So I'll go to curve from objects, project. Alternatively, I could type project. Select curves and points to project onto. I'll actually use my layers to do this. I'm going to right click on layer 4 and say select objects. Sorry, it was on the I thought it was on layer 4. Well, I might have to do it the old-fashioned way. I'll just select the objects. There it is. But I don't need the sides. So those can stay deselected. All I need are the curves themselves. Actually, I don't need all these points either. So let me hold down Control and deselect all of those points. There we go. And I will project all of those onto this surface. I'm going to make the cut layer active. Actually, I'll make the engrave layer active just so you can see it a little bit easier. And in the top view, I'll go ahead and type Enter. And it will create all of those engrave lines. So at this point, let me turn off everything except for the laser cut layer. So we're cleaning things up here a little bit. And if I look at this in perspective, we see that I have a perfectly flat set of topo lines. Likewise, I could move all of these sides up, though it's unnecessary, until they were all in the same plane, like that. Okay, so let's look at this drawing in the top view now. So what I have is I have all the sides. I have the topo lines that need to be cut. Now I need to start really thinking about what they look like from a laser cut standpoint. So the cut lines should be red, so let's change their color to be red, like that. That's pretty good. These other lines that are currently on the engrave layer, that's fine. They can stay on the engrave layer, but I should change the engrave layer to be blue, like that. Now, if I were to do this and go laser cut, this would engrave all of the contours, but it wouldn't cut anything out. So I need a way of actually cutting out pieces that I can glue together. If all of these were cut lines, I'd have all the individual contours, but I'd have no way of stacking them together. They'd just be cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 copies of these lines. So I'll take all of those topo lines right here. I'm going to copy them and put another set right next to them. So I have 2 sets. On the first set, I'm going to start at a low point. So we'll pick, let's see, this is the low point. I can kind of see because of the side there. I'll select it, then I'll work my way up selecting every other contour. So I'll hold down Shift and I'll select this as my next contour. I'll select this as my next contour. That would be every other. That would be every other. This would be. That would not be. Let me zoom in here. Oh, come on. There we go. There, 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 there. That one, that one, that one. That one. And that one. So I've selected every other contour. Oops, sorry, I need this one too. And all of those are going to be put onto the cut layer. So I'll right click and say change object layer, and now those are on the cut layer. Now on the second copy here, I'm going to do the exact opposite. So I started with this curve. I'm going to start with the next curve out, that one. And then I'll continue selecting every other curve. Nope. All right, I've got it. So I've selected every other curve now, and those are going to be put on the cut layer. So let me change object layer. So if I do it right, they should be the exact opposite of each other. So if I look at a shape here and it's blue, I should look at the same contour over here and it should be red. The idea here is that as you construct this, you'll take one from one pile, and basically it's like shuffling a deck of cards. You take one and you slip it in, and that gives you a gluing surface to glue your contours on top of each other. Okay, so I also need, I'm going to move these out of the way for a second. Notice that I'm being careful not to mirror or invert these in any way. They're staying the same so that when I go to fold it afterward, I know which direction to fold it. And so the last thing is I need a border all the way around the outside of these contours. I can use a rectangle, and I can use my smart tracking to find the corners. Same thing here. I can use my smart tracking to find those corners. These 2 rectangles should be on the cut layer because we need to cut them all the way out. So let me change object layer. They're now on the cut layer. So I have each of those that are opposite. I have my sides. And at this point, it's time to go ahead and scale this thing down. Now, when you make this scale, this is going to become really small. Because when I created this, it's like 4,000 feet. in real size. When I scale it down, it's going to be 17 inches. So it's going to be really small. So be aware that it's going to mess with some of the other objects, because if you go to turn those back on, they're going to be huge, and this is now going to be really small. So I'm going to go ahead and take just these objects. I'm going to go to the regular scale. So it's transform and then scale. It's just a 3D scale. So we're scaling everything at once. You could just type in scale into the command line and get there. And I'm going to change it so that this distance here, instead of being whatever it is now going to be 17 inches. So I'll go ahead and type 17 followed by the inch mark and press enter. And you say, oh no, where'd it go? Well, it's still there, it's just really, really small. So I'll type Z for zoom followed by S for selected, and now I see it again. I could move this to the origin to make it a little bit easier to find. I could move this point to 0, 0, 0. And then once again, Z for zoom, followed by S for selected. And now I see it, but it's more at the origin. Yeah? It's 3D scale. You could technically do just a 2D scale of it, but it doesn't really matter. If they're in space at all, if they're not all coplanar, then doing a 2D scale might mess with it. A 3D scale is for sure going to work. Okay, so that's scaled down. I now need to get this ready to actually cut on the laser cutter. It's helpful if you give yourself the laser cutter bed when you go over there to do your cuts. So I'm going to create several rectangles that are 12 by 24. So I'll start right here, and I'm going to say at 24 inches, 12 inches. That represents the size of the laser cutter bed. It's probably going to take me at least 3 pieces to do it. And I now need to arrange these such that each of these falls on one of the laser cutter pages like this. Make sure that everything falls with a little bit of a border around. You're not going to be able to cut right up to the edge of the laser cutter, so you need a little bit of space when you're doing this. We'll take this piece, we will move this one up to there, and we'll move that one over. And now we need to make the rest of these fit. And unfortunately, they're not going to all fit on these 2 sheets, so we're going to move them up onto this sheet. There's 1. There's 2. Now for these, if I need to, I could rotate any one of these so that they fit a little bit better on the page. So for example, if I wanted this one to be cut on this sheet, I could rotate it, and then I could move it here, which is perfectly fine. The key is not to mirror them. So as long as we're rotating and we're keeping flat, we'll still know how to fold them back up. Alternatively, I could have put them at the end of these 2 sheets, but I still need the larger sheet to be able to cut these. If you buy the sheet of cardboard at the bookstore, you'll get 4 total pieces to cut from. So there's an extra. So if you want to pool your resources together with some of your friends, that's fine. You don't have to cut them just yourself, and you'll end up with an extra sheet when you go to cut them up. Anyway, so now that this is ready for cutting, I'll go ahead and select it all, and I'll go to File, Export Selected, and I'm going to write this file to an AutoCAD DWG. There it is, AutoCAD Drawing DWG. I'll choose where it needs to be saved. It belongs in today's folder here. And this is the spring of 2020. Now, sometimes there's some compatibility issues with the AutoCAD that's in the lab over there because they don't update the computers. So it's possible that you might have to save backwards or save as a DXF. Let me see if there's options here.
No, it has to be a DXF.
Actually, I don't think you have to. You might just have to open it in AutoCAD and save backwards. So it can be just a plain DWG. I'm going to go ahead and click on Save. And our export scheme, it doesn't really matter. You can do polylines if you want. I think if you do polylines, it cuts a little bit faster. But again, it's not really going to matter too much. So we'll say OK, and that then writes the AutoCAD file. Everything is set up and ready for you other than the line weights in AutoCAD, which you will have to correct. The colors, if you pick red and you pick blue, those are fine. They'll come through just fine. It's just the line weights that need to be adjusted. So you would do that either ahead of time by opening up AutoCAD. So let me find my DWG here. I love that it's not even listed. How about that? Let's try to open it in that, see if it opens. Alternatively, I might just have to open up AutoCAD. So let's see if it opens in the viewer. Nope, can't cut from there. Okay. Give me a second. Let me open up AutoCAD. Okay, and then with AutoCAD open, I can go in and open it. So once again, I have to go find it. There it is. Go ahead and open it up. This error pops up because it was the AutoCAD file was written by Rhino, not by AutoCAD. Just say OK. And it will load in. You may have to type Z for zoom followed by A for all so that you see it, depending on where it was positioned in space. There it is. And now that this is set up, the only thing left is to look at the layers. So I'll come over here into my layers. Let me go to Layer Properties. And the line weights, which are right here, are all set at default. They need to be adjusted to be at 0.00, this one. And once those are set, you can essentially go over and do the laser cut. An important note about the laser cut, when you go to do the laser cut, make sure that you're printing at full scale. Don't scale the drawing. Don't scale the fit. It's okay. The border on the outside is going to get cut off. That's okay. Don't scale the fit because otherwise your steps aren't going to be the right sizes. So we want to make sure that they are in fact the right size when you go to do the print. If you have one of the lab techs help you do it, make sure they don't scale the fit because it does make a difference. Okay, so this then is what you need. This is what you'll turn in as your DWG file for your assignment. It needs to be a separate post than what you turn in today though. So separate post, even if it's the same thing. Okay, couple other things. When you go to post it, use a screen capture of this blue and red file as your featured image. So I would go in here to top, I would go to capture to file and save that. This is what I'm looking for in terms of signing you off. You'll do the same thing as part of your assignment 202 when you turn that in. So this will be your featured image, but you will also include the DWG file as part of your assignment 202. For today, all I need is this image. I don't need the DWG. It's the assignment that I need the DWG file. Does that make sense?